Day one of NBA free agency made 5 things crystal clear. The first being the Denver Nuggets might be coming back with a serious vengeance next season. The first domino dropped in the form of a surprising trade that caught almost everybody off guard. Denver sent Michael Porter Jr. and a first-round pick to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for Cam Johnson. On the surface, it seemed like a lateral move. After all, both players are in the same position and had similar averages last season. Porter Jr. posted 18.2 points, 7 rebounds, and 2.1 assists per game, and was a key contributor during Denver's 2023 title run. Cam Johnson, despite dealing with an ankle injury that limited him to just 57 games, still put up 18.8 points, 4.7 rebounds, and 3.4 assists per game. For Brooklyn, this felt more like a cap-clearing decision, with the added possibility of flipping MPJ towards the deadline of next season, especially since this year marks the final season of Porter Jr.'s current deal. But for Denver, it was about setting the tone for a new chapter, a fresh start if you will, and that tone got even louder just moments later when they brought back fan favorite Bruce Brown on a minimum deal. Brown, an essential part of Denver's championship roster back in 2023, is a Swiss Army knife guard who can defend, handle the ball, and most importantly, cover for Jamal Murray on the defensive end. His return sends a loud message. The Nuggets are reloading, not retreating. Even after falling to the eventual champion Oklahoma City Thunder in round 2, Denver still has a championship core very much intact. Nikola Jokic continues to be one of the best players on the planet. His chemistry with Jamal Murray hasn't skipped a beat, and Aaron Gordon just came off one of his best individual seasons on both sides of the ball, especially as an evolving three-point threat. The one piece that wasn't quite clicking was Michael Porter Jr. Now, to be fair, Porter Jr. was battling a shoulder injury throughout the playoffs, but his inconsistencies went far beyond that. For the kind of money Denver was paying him, the production just wasn't stacking up in the biggest moments. Despite being one of the league's best shooters, he often seemed to lose confidence quickly and didn't bring enough anywhere else to stay impactful when his shot wasn't falling, resulting in him getting benched in the playoffs for multiple games. Cam Johnson, on the other hand, offers something new. While his regular season efficiency was actually lower than Porter Jr.'s, he brings a more complete overall offensive game. He's comfortable putting the ball on the floor, he's a better playmaker, and his underrated athleticism and ability to get out in transition fits beautifully with the Nuggets' pre-existing system. You can already picture him cutting back door, catching passes from Jokic, and either finishing at the rim or popping open for the three. That's a two-man game that Denver will be able to lean on when their half-court offense slows down. As for Bruce Brown, this could end up being one of the most underrated signings of the entire free agency period. Since leaving Denver, he's bounced around to 3 different teams in 2 seasons, never quite settling into a defined role. But even with the limited minutes, his production stayed steady for the most part, averaging just under 10 points a game while hitting 33% from deep. Those numbers really aren't that far off from his 11.5 points per game on 36% shooting from deep he gave Denver in the title year. So, if he can return to that form with more consistent minutes in a role that he knows very well, that's a huge win, especially on a minimum contract. So, between Jokic's continued brilliance, the return of a trusted role player in Bruce Brown, and the injection in new versatility and creation with Cam Johnson, Denver might have pulled off one of the more quietly brilliant days that we're going to see in this NBA free agency period. The second thing that became undeniably clear after day one of the free agency period is that the Atlanta Hawks are quietly but aggressively building something special. In the matter of just a couple of days, the Atlanta Hawks add Kristaps Porzingis, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Luke Kennard. 3 incredibly solid players who can fill clear gaps in their roster. Somehow, it doesn't even feel like they're finished yet though. They're still going toe-to-toe with the Rockets for who's going to have the best offseason, and we'll get more into Houston later, but Atlanta's start has been nothing short of remarkable. The addition of Nickeil Alexander-Walker is especially interesting because it it wasn't the typical kind of free agency signing. It came via a sign and trade deal with Minnesota, a team that simply couldn't afford him. Atlanta saw the opportunity and then pounced, only needing to give up a 2027 second and some cash in exchange for a guy who's become a serious defensive asset on winning teams. Trae Young was reportedly very vocal in pushing the front office to land him, and now Alexander Walker joins the Hawks on a very reasonable 4-year $62 million deal. At only 26 years of age, he's coming off a season where he put up 9.4 points, 3.2 rebounds, and 2.7 assists per game, and in his time with Minnesota, especially during their deep playoff run, where they knocked off the reigning champion Nuggets, he established himself as a reliable and versatile two-way guard. He shot 38% from 3 and gives Atlanta another defender who can also handle the ball and stretch the floor. You can already start imagining a defensive lineup with him and Dyson Daniels out there at the same time, as that would be an absolute nightmare for opposing guards to deal with, but even that might not be the scariest pairing Atlanta now has. The Kristaps Porzingis addition is what really changes the ceiling of this team. A front court of KP and Jalen Johnson is going to be a serious problem for opponents. Johnson was well on his way to winning the most improved player before the injury last season, as he's got that downhill relentless style that almost feels like a budget version of Giannis, attacking the rim with force and confidence. So, pairing him with a big who can stretch the floor like Porzingis can, while also protecting the rim on the other end, could unlock something really special. KP's elite spacing at his size will give Johnson even more room to operate, and defensively, Porzingis helps to cover Johnson on the back line with his strong shot-blocking instincts, something Atlanta sorely lacked last season. Then, there's the offensive fireworks with Trae Young. Porzingis, without a doubt, is the best pick-and-pop partner Trae has ever had. He's a guy who can step out and punish switches, stay behind the arc as a release valve, or roll hard to the rim depending on the coverage. That two-man game alone could carry them through tough moments, but it becomes even more dangerous when you add a guy like Jalen Johnson flying around as a cutter into the mix. The options just open up in a way that they never really have before for this team, and Atlanta still wasn't done. They also would then scoop up Luke Kennard on a 1-year $11 million deal. Kennard has quietly been one of the most consistent three-point shooters in the league for years, and this signing is particularly important after they sent Bojan Bogdanovic to the Clippers at the deadline last season. Kennard fills the gap perfectly and gives them another high-level floor spacer to pair with Trae, KP, and the rest of the retooled roster. This Hawks squad is starting to resemble that Indiana Pacers team we just saw make the run all the way to the finals, as they're now a loaded team with talent and depth centered around an all-star level player who's not necessarily a superstar. But this is where all the pressure now shifts to Trae Young. This is going to be the most talented roster he's ever had by a long shot, and that comes with serious expectations that he has to step up and be better. Not just with his play on the court, but as a leader. He has to prove that he's more than just some box score numbers, that he can drive winning basketball at the highest level. And what makes all of this even more exciting, or terrifying depending on your perspective, is that Atlanta isn't even done yet. With the flexibility they still have and how calculated every move has been so far, there's a real chance that the Hawks aren't just trying to sneak into the playoffs. They're building to something far bigger. Now, the third thing that became immediately clear after day one of NBA free agency is that the Dallas Mavericks have their plan fully in place. With the signing of D'Angelo Russell, Dallas has locked in a ball-handling guard who can carry a good chunk of the offensive load, while Kyrie Irving remains sidelined until January or February. Once Kai returns, Russell likely shifts to a sixth-man role, where his scoring bursts and playmaking can thrive against opponents' second units. Now, it's true, Russell just came off one of the worst seasons of his career, averaging 12.6 points per game on a disappointing 52% true shooting percentage, which ranked 183rd out of 192 qualified scorers who averaged at least 10 points per game. But just at 29 years old and arriving in Dallas on a budget-friendly 2-year $13 million million deal, there really is some upside here. Russell's arrival also brings the layer of flexibility to the Mavericks rotation, especially early on. Cooper Flagg is expected to have a legitimate shot at running the point guard, but Russell provides insurance. If the Flagg experiment needs time or falters, Dallas won't be scrambling to adjust. They've now got someone who can step in immediately and shoulder some of that responsibility without completely changing the system. In fact, depending on how training camp and preseason shake out, Russell might even just be off the bench for the whole season, with Cooper Flagg fully getting the reins early on. His presence gives Jason Kidd more options and more balance. And speaking of balance, this Dallas roster is starting to look downright stacked. Once you start building out potential lineups, it's hard not to be blown away by their depth. You've got guys like Max Christie, Russell himself, Dante Exum, and Daniel Gafford, who are all more than likely going to be coming off the bench. That's a second unit with real production and versatility, something that is certainly going to be a strength of this Dallas Mavericks team. That starting five could be configured in multiple different ways depending on matchups, but no matter what it looks like, it's going to feature a dangerous mix of high-end talent and athletic role players. What's especially exciting is how all of this fits around Cooper Flagg, whose development will be at the heart of the season. And if you're curious about how Flagg fits into all of this, there's a whole video on that you can watch after this one. But back to Russell for a moment. Despite some hesitation from a portion of the fan base, this really does feel like a low-risk, high-reward move. The contract isn't bloated. It gives Dallas time to figure things out, and it gives Russell the opportunity to rebuild his value on a team that can surround him with structure and shooting. On any given night, he's still capable of catching fire and dropping 20 to 30 points like an all-star. And with Irving out for the first few months, they will need someone who can absorb that kind of offensive workload, and for that price, you're not going to get anyone better. So all in all, the signing doesn't just help plug a short-term hole, it rounds out what's shaping to be one of the more deeper teams in the league, while also giving the Mavericks room to adapt as Flagg evolves and Irving gets back to full speed. The plan is clearly set in stone, and it's a good one. The fourth thing that became crystal clear after day one of NBA free agency is that the Houston Rockets might just walk away from this offseason as the ultimate winners. In just one day, they managed to land two players that the Lakers were targeting, Dorian Finney-Smith and Clint Capella. Now, they're both headed to Houston, and it isn't just about the talent, it's about the fit, depth, and intent. What makes Finney-Smith's signing even more telling is that it wasn't just about the money. He agreed to a 4-year, $53 million deal, roughly earning $13 million a season, which is perfectly reasonable for a high-level 3-and-D player like himself. It feels like he could have got even more, but it seems clear that he wants to be a part of what is building in Houston. Finney-Smith is exactly the kind of piece that fits Ime Udoka's defensive identity. He's long, versatile, and has the strength and instincts to guard multiple positions at a really high level. In his short stint with the Lakers, just 43 games, his impact was already showing. According to Cleaning the Glass, LA's defense improved nearly 8 points per 100 possessions when he was on the floor, placing him in the 95th percentile league-wide. That kind of swing doesn't just go unnoticed, and it's not just his defense. Offensively, Finney-Smith keeps it simple but efficient. He shot a career-high 41% from three last season, splitting time with Brooklyn and Los Angeles. On the Rockets, that team struggled with spacing and half-court execution last season. So having someone who does not need the ball but can still punish defenses from the corners is a massive win. His offensive efficiency, 120.1 points per 100 shot attempts, paired with a usage rate of under 11%, makes him the perfect low-maintenance glue guy in a lineup stacked with dominant scorers. But then came the Clint Capella acquisition, which raised many eyebrows. Not because of his talent, but because of Houston's existing big man depth. With Alperen Şengün, Steven Adams, and Jock Landale already on the roster, adding Capella feels a little crowded at a first glance. But this move may be more layered than it looks. It could be that Houston already is planning to flip Capella in another deal, taking advantage of a desperate team's need for size, or or they could be easily planning to keep him and continue running a double big setup that worked well towards the end of last season, and they just need another backup big. But another possibility, and maybe the most likely, is that this signals the end of the road for Jock Landale's time in Houston. A trade involving Landale to a center-needy team like Milwaukee or the Lakers would make perfect sense, especially with the way the market is shaping up. But no matter how you slice it, these two additions alone have made waves. But when you pair them with the earlier blockbuster of the offseason when they traded for Kevin Durant, the Rockets now seriously look terrifying. They were already the 2 seed in the West last season, and now they just added wing defense, high-level shot creation, a veteran big, and one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. This team's no longer just building towards something. They're now here. Right now, it's hard not to see Houston as one of the 3 best teams in the conference, alongside Oklahoma City and maybe even Denver after today's moves. But considering just how young their core still is, they may just be getting started. Now, the 5th thing that became unmistakably clear after day 1 of free agency is that the Memphis Grizzlies aren't planning to fold. They're looking to reload. After a shocking decision to trade Desmond Bane to Orlando in exchange for a significant haul of future draft picks, there was a brief moment of uncertainty. From the outside looking in, it appeared as if Memphis might have been waving the white flag, acknowledging that the Western Conference has passed them up and maybe opting to take a step back before competing again. But that doesn't appear to be what's happening anymore. If anything, it feels like the Grizzlies are just pivoting, not rebuilding, not tanking, just recalibrating, and fast. The first and loudest signal came with the blockbuster extension of Jaren Jackson Jr., who inked a 5-year, $240 million deal to stay in Memphis. That's roughly $48 million a season for a former Defensive Player of the Year, and it shows that the front office isn't hesitating to back his continued development. And there is good reason for that. Early in the season, with Ja sidelined, Jackson Jr. showed flashes of being so much more on the offensive end, as he was aggressive getting downhill, creating for others, leveraging his jump shooting ability, and most importantly, his game in the post was smooth and super difficult to deal with. If the Grizzlies can tap into that version of JJJ alongside of a fully healthy Ja next season, they could be far more dynamic than people are expecting. But Memphis didn't stop there either. Shortly after Cleveland pulled off the Lonzo Ball deal, it was clear that Ty Jerome's time with the Cavaliers was coming to a close. And not even after 24 hours after I made that video and stated that, Jerome was headed to Memphis on a 3-year $28 million deal. That's a sneaky good pickup. Jerome quietly became one of the league's most productive bench guards last season and was even in the conversation for 6th man of the year. In just under 20 minutes a night, he averaged 12.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 3.4 assists while shooting an impressive 44% from deep. He was a spark plug off the bench for the Cavs, delivering a mid-game flurry that would completely swing the momentum of the game and keep the offense steady while some of the starters were resting. Now, he brings that same punch to a Memphis team that desperately needs more backcourt depth and shooting next to Ja, especially now without Desmond Bane. So, while it might have looked like Memphis was just going to retreat, really they're just adjusting. The Bane trade may have hurt them in the short term, as there's no replacing his shooting and toughness overnight. But the front office clearly believes they still have talent, and the moves they've made point to a franchise still focused on competing. With a more balanced roster, a reinvestment in Jaren Jackson Jr., and a dynamic scoring guard in Ty Jerome, the Grizzlies are setting the stage for a season where they just are not going to give up. And speaking of that Lonzo Ball deal that got Jerome in Memphis, there are 3 major reasons why I believe the addition of Lonzo Ball in Cleveland could put the Cavaliers over the top next season. And if you want to hear that full breakdown and see why I think they can win the title, you can check it out right now.